A horizon spreads wide over the ancient plateau, its color the faded gold of a memory half-remembered. Wind glides through dry grass and over stones that rise from the earth like vertebrae of something once alive. There are no birds here, no sound of water, only the slow breathing of dust and distance. The valley opens like a wound between two mountain ridges near the borderlands of ancient Elam, what explorers later called the Burned Plain, Dashti Sokta. Long before Persia had kings, before clay tablets carried the weight of human words, this land already held the marks of something enormous. Archaeologists who came here in the 1960s found fragments of obsidian tools, traces of forgotten hearths, and among them, a single indentation in stone too deliberate to be nature's work. They measured it carefully. Nearly 6 feet from heel to toe, perfectly shaped, the depth of a man's palm. Local herders whispered that it belonged to the sleepers, the ones who walked before men learned to speak. Yet to those who studied it by lantern light, it seemed more like an offering than a footprint, carved with reverence, not accident. The limestone around it was flecked with quartz, shimmering faintly under the night sky, as though it had swallowed starlight long ago. When the first Assyriologists examined the site, they found something stranger still. The pattern of stones scattered across the valley seemed almost deliberate. 12 mounds forming a crescent, each aligned to the position of the rising stars over Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE. The configuration mirrored a lost Sumerian myth, the Circle of the Watchers, a story of beings said to have descended when the world was still soft with mist. Their footprints, the tablets claimed, became mountains. Their breath turned rivers into veins of light. But in these quiet plains, the myth feels less like legend and more like memory turned to matter. The wind carries a tone here, low and resonant, that travelers swear they can feel more than hear. It hums against the ribs and in the hollow of the throat, the way a temple does when one breathes inside it. Some geologists have suggested that it's the sound of air moving through subterranean chambers carved by erosion. Yet when night falls and the stars gather, that same sound begins to form patterns, rising and falling like a chant. Beneath the moss and sediment, a subtle vibration stirs, as if the valley itself remembers being called by name. Ancient texts from Sumer and the Indus Valley speak of a time when the Tall Ones taught humankind to measure the heavens. The Mahabharata tells of beings of great stature who spoke in thunder and vanished in smoke. Norse sagas remember the Jotnar, giants of frost and fire who shaped the earth before men learned runes. Across continents and centuries, the same image endures. Vast presences, patient and sorrowful, receding as the world grew smaller. In this valley, where stone rises like frozen breath, those tales begin to sound less like invention and more like remembrance. One evening, as the sun sank into violet haze, an archaeologist named Henri Delacourt stayed alone among the stones. His field notes, now brittle in a Tehran archive, describe what he called a pattern of resonance. When he struck one pillar with his staff, another stone several meters away gave a faint reply, a soft echo through the ground. He wrote that it felt as though the valley were built to sing back to itself. He never returned. A sandstorm swallowed his camp 2 nights later. Only his sketches remained, rough outlines of colossal silhouettes embedded in shadow. Over the years, researchers have come and gone, but the plain resists interpretation. Some see it as the remnants of a Neolithic observatory, others as a sacred necropolis aligned to lunar cycles. Yet those who spend a night there describe the same dream, towering figures walking across the horizon, each step slow as centuries, their faces hidden behind veils of wind. The ground trembles softly, not from fear, but recognition, like an instrument touched by the note it was made to play. The stones themselves tell their story in texture. Under a layer of wind-polished sand, fine lines appear, spirals, arcs, and shapes that echo petroglyphs from faraway Göbekli Tepe. These markings speak of continuity. The same hands, or at least the same memory, shaping stone across the millennia. The valley may have been a meeting point, a sacred middle ground where myths converged before geography divided them. Even the Bedouin who roam nearby still call it Wadi al-Dilal, the Valley of Shadows, and claim that when the moon is new, Tall forms move along the ridges, walking without sound. At night, the temperature drops sharply. The air becomes glass, and the sky unfolds with impossible depth. Standing in that silence, one feels both infinitesimal and infinite, as though one's own shadow stretches backward through time. Somewhere beneath the crust of stone lies the outline of an ancient civilization's awe, preserved in the geometry of rock and resonance. And in that quiet, a question lingers. Were these truly giants, or memories of a human longing for something greater than the self? The older myths hint at gentleness. The giants of Sumer were not conquerors but caretakers, shaping rivers, lifting stars into place, teaching humankind to listen to the earth's slow heart. In some tablets, their names are written beside constellations, as if they ascended into the sky not through death but through memory. The Indus hymns call them the tall teachers, guardians of silence. Even the Norse, who painted their giants in frost and fire, ended with reconciliation. A reminder that creation needs both the builder and the breaker, both echo and stillness. Deeper within, they found alcoves cut into the rock at regular intervals. Each contained a single slab of basalt, upright like a book standing open. Every slab bore marks that shimmered faintly in the lamplight. Not writing, but impressions, as though images had been pressed into the surface from another dimension of time. When infrared scanners were used, patterns emerged. Concentric circles, constellations, geometric ratios. The same sacred proportions found in Sumerian temples and the pyramids of Egypt. It was a library, but not of words. A library built to preserve silence. Dr. Hallberg described it as a cathedral of memory. She noted that when the team spoke, their voices did not echo in the usual way. Instead, the sound seemed to fall into the stone, absorbed. The air felt thick, almost liquid. She theorized that the chamber's shape was designed to capture vibration, transforming it into resonance that lingered below the range of hearing. Perhaps, she speculated, this place once held recitations, prayers, or chants that were meant to be remembered by the rock itself. In the mythology of Anatolia, there are whispers of the builders of thought, ancient beings said to shape not stone, but meaning. They believed sound was a form of architecture, and that truth could be stored not in script, but in vibration. What we call writing, they called breathing in pattern. The library of stone dreams may have been their sanctuary, where every voice left a trace that could one day be reawakened. When Dr. Hallberg's team played harmonic frequencies inside one of the chambers, tones corresponding to the intervals of an ancient Mesopotamian scale, something extraordinary occurred. The walls shimmered faintly. A subtle phosphorescence pulsed through the carvings, slow and rhythmic, as though the stone itself were remembering the song. It lasted less than a minute, but those who witnessed it described it as standing inside the echo of creation. Afterward, the instruments recorded an ambient tone lingering in the chamber for several hours, though no sound could be heard by human ears. It was as if the valley itself continued to hum quietly long after the voices stopped. The deeper the researchers went, the more labyrinthine the passages became. The final chamber they reached was circular, its ceiling domed with crystalline layers. Beneath it lay a basin carved from the same rock, half filled with dust that shimmered faintly like powdered mica. Hallberg believed it might once have held water, a reflective pool used to read the sky below ground. Around the basin, the walls were carved with spirals intersecting at perfect right angles, each marking a celestial coordinate. At the center of the chamber stood a single monolith, waist-high, its top polished to a mirror-like sheen. The explorers could see their reflections in it, though distorted, as though viewed through moving water. They noticed that the mirror did not reflect their faces clearly, but rather forms of light and shadow shifting slowly, like the shapes of dreams. The team grew silent, as if words might disturb something that had been sleeping for millennia. Later analysis of the dust from the basin revealed traces of rare minerals, orpiment, lapis, crushed hematite, the same pigments used in early Mesopotamian and Egyptian art to depict the heavens. The combination was deliberate, alchemical. The library had been designed as a map of both earth and sky, where reflection and memory intertwined. Perhaps that is what remains here. Not a ruin of violence, but a monument to balance. A valley built not to hold bodies, but remembrance. Every curve of stone seems arranged to draw breath into silence and release it as music. Each moss-covered ridge glows faintly under moonlight, a ribcage of forgotten harmony. And if one listens carefully, the wind seems to shape syllables, not in any language known, but in a tone that feels older than speech. The expedition never finished its work. A minor tremor sealed the entrance again within months. All that remains are their notes, photographs, and the recordings of that deep, resonant hum. Hallberg wrote her final field entry by lamplight before leaving the valley. It feels less like we discovered this place, and more like it allowed us to enter, as though it wished to be remembered again, just once before going back to sleep. No one has found the site since. The coordinates on her maps are partially erased, blurred by time and wind. But those who have studied her notes agree on one thing. The architecture follows the same golden ratios seen in sacred sites around the world. Chavin in Peru, Giza in Egypt, Angkor in Cambodia. A pattern without beginning or end, repeating across civilizations that could never have met. Perhaps this library was not meant for any single people. Perhaps it was the first archive, not of history, but of consciousness itself. A place where the earth kept record of the vibrations that shaped it, where human wonder was absorbed into stone and stored as eternal resonance. The villagers still tell stories. When the wind passes through certain canyons nearby, they say it carries voices, murmurs in no known tongue, rising and falling like the tide of sleep. Some nights, the cliffs faintly glow with pale light, as though a dream within the mountain has briefly awakened. They call it the remembering. No one disturbs it when it happens. And so the library of stone dreams remains where it always has been, not buried, not lost, but folded gently within the memory of the earth. Every grain of dust still holds a whisper. Every rock remembers the vibration of a word too old for sound. Perhaps one night, long after humankind has quieted, the stones will hum again, softly, like a choir at the end of the world. Until then, the library sleeps, listening to the stars. When dawn creeps across the plain, shadows retreat toward the mountains, leaving only outlines, faint, uncertain, but vast. The footprint remains, half-buried, collecting dew. Around it, the air hums like a slow exhalation. The desert brightens, yet the feeling deepens. That size and sanctity once shared a single breath, and the world was not divided between myth and matter. Somewhere between the shimmer of quartz and the silence of dust, the valley remembers. In the heart of the desert, where wind speaks the language of erosion and the horizon seems endless, there stands a single column of stone. It rises from the sand like a spine of the earth, solitary, unbroken, its summit lost against the shimmer of heat. Travelers who approach it say that time itself slows there, that footsteps grow heavy as though gravity deepens near its shadow. The Bedouin call it Ahmed al-Sama, the pillar of the sky. To others it is merely a curiosity, a remnant of an age when stone monuments were carved to please unseen gods. Yet those who have stood before it speak of a presence, not divine, but vast, like standing at the pulse of the world. The pillar stands nearly 30 meters high, carved from a single block of sandstone streaked with veins of quartz. Its surface bears no inscription, only a faint lattice of geometric lines running upward in spirals, like the memory of ropes that once bound heaven to earth. Archaeologists from the University of Damascus first documented it in 1954, believing it part of a vanished temple complex. Fragments of pottery nearby dated to the early Bronze Age, but no ruins surrounded it. No foundation, no fallen capitals, no neighboring stones. Only this, a perfect, impossible monolith anchored to nothing but its own endurance. Ground-penetrating radar decades later revealed something stranger. Beneath the pillar runs a shaft descending nearly 20 meters, lined with smooth stone, ending in a circular chamber no larger than a single human body. There are no stairs, no entry, no passage. A sealed silence beneath a standing giant. The ancients left stories to fill such absences. In Akkadian myth, it is said the first mountain rested upon 7 pillars of light. One fell, breaking the harmony between earth and sky. The fallen pillar, banished to the desert, continued to hum, a sound that kept the heavens from collapsing. In Egyptian cosmology, Djed was the backbone of Osiris, raised each year to ensure the stability of the world. Perhaps these shadows never left. Perhaps they wait for the right kind of listener, not one who measures but one who kneels. For some voices, even the earth must pause before echoing them. And when it finally does, it speaks not in thunder, but in stillness, the language of giants who once walked the dawn and left behind only this: a valley, a whisper, and the faint remembrance of their names. And in this forgotten expanse of Arabia, inscriptions on nearby cliffs mention the builders of the Axis, a brotherhood of priests who guarded the stone of balance. Perhaps this is that stone. The pillar's geometry follows a recurring ratio, the same found in megalithic sites from Karnak to Nabta Playa. Its spiral grooves mark solstice alignments with uncanny precision. When the sun reaches its zenith in midsummer, the pillar's shadow falls perfectly along a natural ridge, pointing directly toward Sirius, the star once believed to govern resurrection. At sunset, when the heat fades and the air cools, something happens that no photograph can capture. The pillar glows, not bright, not supernatural, but faintly luminous, as if the quartz veins within it store daylight and release it slowly through the night. Explorers in the 19th century wrote of this ghost light, believing it a trick of reflection. Yet even under cloudy skies, the phenomenon persists. The glow is soft, pulsing, like the steady breathing of the earth itself. In 2008, a small expedition led by Syrian archaeologist Dr. Nasir Haddad attempted to measure the pillar's composition. They discovered traces of magnetite embedded deep in the stone, rare for sandstone. When they placed instruments around it, they recorded electromagnetic pulses corresponding with fluctuations in the planet's geomagnetic field. It was as though the stone acted as an antenna, tuned not to the heavens above, but to the earth below. And then there is the sound. When the wind moves across the desert in certain directions, the pillar sings. A low tone, barely audible at first, growing into a steady resonance that carries for miles. It is not whistling, nor mechanical vibration. The frequency, 64 Hz, corresponds precisely with the Earth's Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the planet's electromagnetic field. Perhaps coincidence, or perhaps memory. The Bedouins still perform a small ritual when passing. They touch the pillar's base and murmur the word sabir, patience. They say the stone listens, that it has listened since the world's beginning. Once it held up the sky, now it holds silence. The night opens along the bend of an old river, not rushing, not still, only moving in the way memories move when they are tired of being forgotten. One legend tells of a time when the heavens sagged from their weight. The gods sent a giant to brace them with his shoulders. When his strength waned, he turned into stone so that the sky might never fall again. In the folds of this myth lives an intuition older than religion, the sense that balance itself must be tended, that even stillness requires guardianship. Night transforms the pillar. The stars unfurl around it in perfect geometry. From a distance, it looks less like a monument and more like a sundial made for eternity, a fixed axis around which the heavens turn. Long exposure photographs taken by astronomers show the stars circling it in flawless halos, as if marking time around the last memory of creation's spine. Those who have slept nearby describe vivid dreams, of standing beneath a vast canopy of light, of voices whispering in languages they do not know, of climbing an invisible staircase through air that glows like dawn. They wake with sand on their lips and tears in their eyes, unable to say why. Dr. Haddad once wrote, after his final visit, "I began this journey as an archaeologist and ended it as a listener. The pillar does not tell us what came before. It tells us how to stand. When dawn comes, the desert returns to its silence. The pillar casts its long shadow across the dunes, pointing toward nowhere in particular. Birds rest briefly upon its edge, then fly away. The light rises, the hum fades, but somewhere within the quartz veins, something continues. An inaudible vibration, steady, patient, ancient. The desert never buries it completely. Sand covers, wind uncovers. The cycle repeats endlessly, as though the earth refuses to forget its own spine. Perhaps it is no relic at all. Perhaps it is a reminder that the world, fragile and infinite, rests upon invisible harmonies, and that those harmonies once had shape, once had weight, once stood tall enough to touch the stars. When night returns, the pillar glows again, faint, unwavering. The wind hums, and for a moment it feels as if the sky, too, is leaning down to listen. Mist folds over the water like a thin veil of breath, soft and endless. And in that moment, beneath the boundless dark, one understands why the ancients built monuments to stillness, not to reach heaven, but to remember that the earth itself was already sacred. The pillar holds the silence, and the silence holds the sky. Somewhere beneath the dry plains of Anatolia, where the horizon seems to float in heat and silence, the earth opens into shadow. The entrance is nothing more than a crack between two hills, narrow enough to be missed by any hurried eye. Yet once inside, the air changes, cooler, denser, humming faintly as though a vast lung breathes somewhere below. For centuries, the villagers nearby spoke of a hollow beneath the plain. Shepherds heard echoes that did not belong to their own steps, and water from wells sank faster here, vanishing as though drawn into some deep chamber. Then, in 1972, a team of Turkish archaeologists exploring the Cappadocian subterrane discovered what the locals already knew: a labyrinth carved into volcanic rock, deeper than the height of a cathedral. They called it Salonai Ebedi, the Hall Eternal. The descent begins with a spiral staircase hewn from tufa stone, winding for 40 meters before opening into a corridor so vast the lantern light dissolves before reaching its ceiling. The walls are smooth, cold to the touch. Underfoot, the stone bears the polish of centuries of passage, as though countless feet once walked here, always in the same direction. Sound behaves strangely in this place. The first explorers noted that their footsteps echoed even when they stood still. Later, when audio equipment was used, the recordings captured faint rhythms continuing seconds after silence. Measured, steady, almost human. Some proposed seismic activity. Others admitted uncertainty. The hall seemed to possess its own memory of motion. Somewhere beneath the slow current, a glimmer rises and falls. Not a fish, not a stone. Something white and curved, catching the light of the moon. In the central chamber stands a row of columns, 13 in all, rising from the floor like the ribs of an enormous creature. They are perfectly spaced, each inscribed with shallow carvings that seem neither decorative nor linguistic. Under raking light, the patterns reveal sequences resembling waveforms, repeating at precise intervals. The archaeologists realized the grooves corresponded to sound frequencies. The hall was not only architecture, it was acoustics made visible. Ancient Anatolian myths tell of places built to hold the footsteps of the gods. The Hittite tablets speak of Esera, the foundation realm beneath the earth, where the divine walked to steady creation. Every step they took was said to leave resonance that shaped the mountains above. This hall, buried and forgotten, feels like a remnant of that belief, a chamber built to preserve the rhythm of being itself. At one end of the hall, there lies a platform engraved with concentric circles, each filled with tiny notches, thousands of them, perfectly cut. They form a pattern identical to the lunar cycles recorded in Neolithic sites like Nabta and Newgrange. It was as if someone had mapped not the sky above, but the passing of ages beneath the ground. A fragment of pottery found near the entrance bears an inscription in Lowian script. The steps of those who came first do not fade. Later, when radar mapping was conducted, researchers discovered multiple levels beneath the main chamber, interconnected through shafts too narrow for human descent. The echoes from these spaces produced tones that rose and fell in harmonic sequence when struck. The site had been tuned deliberately like a vast subterranean instrument. But no bones, no tools, no remnants of habitation were ever found. Only floor upon floor of corridors polished by invisible travelers. During one expedition in 1999, Dr. Meltem Arslan, the lead archaeologist, spent a night alone inside. Her journal, later recovered, describes a strange calm. "The hall breathes," she wrote. "When you close your eyes, you can hear footsteps, hundreds, moving in slow procession, as though time itself were walking past." She tried to record the sounds, but her microphone captured only low vibrations beyond the range of hearing. Some scientists attributed the phenomenon to microseismic waves traveling through the Cappadocian tuff. But locals said the footsteps belonged to the Eski Yürüyenler, the old walkers, spirits of the first builders who still circled the chamber, maintaining its eternal rhythm. The following year, a small light aircraft passing over the area detected electromagnetic anomalies directly above the site. They pulsed in intervals matching the spacing of the carved waveforms. The readings suggested an interplay between the Earth's magnetism and the geometry of the structure. It was as if the hall's proportions harmonized with the planet's own pulse. Archaeologists rarely speak of beauty in technical reports, but Arslan did. "It feels designed to teach stillness," she wrote. "The farther one walks, the quieter thought becomes. The air thickens until breath itself feels ancient." Long ago this river was called Anshan's Vein, part of the great network that fed the cradle lands between the Zagros Mountains and the Persian Plain. Its waters once touched Susa, the heart of Elam, where brick ziggurats once rose in offering to gods whose names no one speaks aloud anymore. Today, the locals call it the Karun, and most pass by without knowing that its bed hides a whisper of prehistory. A riddle older than the wheel, older than fire's worship. She noted something else. When lanterns flicker, the columns cast long shadows that seem to move independently, slow and deliberate, like figures walking beside you. Their pace never falters. They do not turn. When you stop, they continue, and the echo of your own footsteps follows long after you have ceased to move. Perhaps the hall was once a sanctuary for sound, a place where vibration, not voice, was worshipped. The ancients might have believed that movement was sacred, that to walk was to trace the rhythm of the cosmos. Every footstep, every heartbeat, every breath, all part of a divine cadence. And perhaps this chamber was built to remember it. Modern researchers, reluctant to indulge myth, call it a phenomenon of resonance decay. Yet no simulation has ever reproduced the sound entirely. Something remains beyond measurement. The way the stone seems to answer itself, the feeling of time folding inward. Standing in that endless space, surrounded by columns like petrified music, one begins to sense the shape of memory itself. It is not flat. It spirals, it reverberates, it walks in circles without end. At dawn, when sunlight touches the desert above, a faint warmth seeps into the walls. The echoes fade, the air softens. Dust motes rise like spirits ascending. The hall grows silent again, waiting for the next traveler to pass and lend it new rhythm. No gates mark its entrance. No signs name it. It will not keep you, but it will remember that you came. Every sound, every breath, every whisper becomes another footstep in its unending procession. Perhaps this is what the ancients meant by eternity. Not a place beyond time, but a resonance that never dies, a music that carries the memory of all that has ever moved. Above ground, the wind moves across the plain, and no one would guess what sleeps beneath their feet. But deep below, the hall still hums, its pulse echoing through centuries, its silence full of motion. And if one listens long enough, through the slow drift of dusk and the thinning of thought, it becomes clear that nothing in this world is ever still. The stones walk, the echoes breathe, and somewhere, just beneath the threshold of hearing, the footsteps continue. Forever. In 1934, an English archaeologist named Margaret Preston wrote of a place she stumbled upon while mapping the floodplains near Awaz. Her notebook, now resting in the British Museum, tells of a ribcage of impossible size, revealed by the withdrawal of a drought season. She measured each curve, 3 meters wide, calcified like coral, half buried in silt. She believed it to be petrified wood, perhaps a fallen trunk. But as the moon rose that evening, she wrote something quieter. The river hums near it, as if remembering. High upon a plateau in the southern Andes, Where the air is thin enough to turn breath into prayer, lies a field of stones arranged in spirals. The locals call it El Tejido del Cielo, the woven sky. The stones are small by human measure, but they stretch for nearly 2 kilometers, forming shapes that can only be seen from above. Lines that echo constellations, arcs that mimic the Milky Way's curve. The site was first surveyed in 1929 by a Peruvian archaeologist named Luis Ortega, who mistook it for an ancient agricultural terrace. Decades later, satellite imaging revealed the truth. The stones trace exact celestial positions as they would have appeared around 10,000 BCE, long before any known civilization settled here. Wind is the only constant sound on the plateau. It weaves through the labyrinth like a whispering archivist. Each stone hums faintly when touched. The quartz within them holds a subtle charge, and sunlight glances from edge to edge like a coated shimmer. Those who camp nearby report an eerie sensation that the stars above and the stones below are communicating, reflections of one another across time. In 2015, a joint team of Peruvian and German researchers mapped the arrangement using LiDAR. The resulting model revealed something astonishing. The pattern not only mirrors the constellations visible today, but also includes the positions of stars long vanished from the sky, celestial ghosts erased by precession. Whoever placed these stones recorded a heaven no longer seen by human eyes. Local Quechua legends tell of the keepers of light, who taught the mountains to speak with the stars. They were said to carve the sky into the earth, preserving cosmic memory against the forgetting of men. Each stone, the stories say, was tuned to a star, a bond between Earth's gravity and the fire above. At sunset, when the temperature falls and the sky blushes violet, the stones begin to release the warmth they've gathered through the day. The plateau glows softly, like embers under ash. The effect is breathtaking and quiet, as though the heavens have descended to rest against the ground. Archaeologists noted a central stone unlike the rest, taller, perfectly cylindrical, made of basalt, black as sleep. Its top is polished smooth, and when filled with water, it reflects the entire firmament. The Quechua elders call it the mirror of ancestors. They say the first astronomers gazed not upward but downward, reading the stars from this reflection, for only in still water could the true pattern of the universe be seen. Excavations beneath the basalt column uncovered fragments of gold leaf engraved with lines of unknown script. The markings, upon analysis, were found to correspond to harmonic ratios, not language, frequencies that matched the vibrations of planetary orbits. The ancients had written music, not words, into metal, embedding celestial rhythm into artifact. When wind crosses the plateau at night, the stones resonate in subtle chords. Sensitive microphones have captured frequencies that correspond to the same harmonic ratios found on the golden fragments. It is as if the plateau still sings the song of its creation, replaying the music of the sky that once guided its builders. One evening, as researchers packed their equipment, an old shepherd approached the camp. He pointed toward the spirals and said softly, "Those are not stones. They are the dreams of stars that wish to fall, but the earth caught them." Then he walked away, leaving the team in the growing blue darkness. Years later, divers returned when the water fell again. They found not one shape, but a pattern of them. Arches and long spines, running parallel beneath the riverbed. Some curved like vertebrae, others like boat hulls turned to stone. The radiocarbon tests proved inconclusive, too ancient, too eroded, mixed with mineral salts that confused the readings. Some said they were remnants of extinct whales that had wandered inland when this plain was an inland sea during the Miocene epoch. Others whispered they were not bones at all, but the foundations of a temple swallowed by time and current. By midnight, the air turns crystalline. The Milky Way arches directly overhead, perfectly aligned with the largest spiral. It is easy to imagine the ancients standing here, wrapped in furs, whispering to the stars. The boundary between heaven and ground blurs until one can no longer tell which is reflection and which is reality. In that moment, one feels what the ancients must have felt, that creation was not distant or divine, but participatory. That the earth itself once spoke the language of constellations. Perhaps this plateau was not built as an observatory but as a remembrance, a vow that the sky would never again be lost, a message written not on parchment, but in gravity and light. When dawn comes, frost forms on the stones, turning them pale as bone. The wind quiets, the glow fades, the stars retreat, yet something lingers, a vibration, a hush that feels like gratitude. The sky, though silent, seems to nod toward its mirror below, and the plateau waits, holding the memory of starlight in every grain of dust. Perhaps the ancients knew what we have forgotten, that the cosmos is not above us, but within us, mirrored in our blood, in the iron of our veins, in the pulse that answers the rhythm of the stars. The sky was written in stone, and the stone, patient and luminous, still remembers how to read. The sea in this part of the world is unnaturally quiet. When you stand on the bank at dusk, the air carries an undernote, almost a vibration. The reeds sway though no wind passes. Local fishermen claim that, on still nights, the river sings. It is not melody, not echo, a sound that moves through the bones, the same way thunder moves through sleep. Scientists from Tehran University brought instruments in 1997 to study these vibrations. They called them subaqueous harmonics, caused by shifting sediments beneath the current. Yet their reports mentioned something unmeasurable, the rhythmic pulse that matched neither current nor wind, as though the river exhaled in long, steady sighs. Its waves move as though remembering another rhythm, slower, deeper, an ancient tide that once touched gods instead of shores. And beneath that stillness, on the seafloor off the coast of modern-day Cyprus, a face sleeps. It was first seen in 1973 by divers mapping post-Bronze Age shipwrecks, a fragment of a cheek, carved from marble larger than a house. The divers thought it a trick of light until their beams revealed a jawline, lips, and the curve of an eye open to the dark. The sand around it trembled with each current, as if even the water hesitated to disturb it. They called it the Colossus of Larnaca. No records speak of such a statue. The Greeks knew of Rhodes, the Romans of Nero's bronze effigy, but nothing of this, nothing so vast that its face alone spanned 20 meters. Subsequent dives uncovered fragments scattered across a quarter-kilometer of seabed. A hand the size of a boat, fingers curled as if in mid-gesture. Part of a torso, ribs like eroded cliffs. A single stone I still polished smooth. Oceanographers mapped the area and found that the remains rest upon a plateau of submerged ruins, walls and foundations covered in coral, the ghost of a city swallowed when sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. The site predates classical Greece by at least 7,000 years. Before marble carving, before known temples, before language itself. What architect could have built it? Or was it never built but transformed? A mountain softened into a face shaped by wind, by water, by something older than art? Divers who descend speak of silence unlike any other. The water thickens, the light dims into a dusky gold, and there it is, the visage lying on its side, half buried in silt, its expression not pain nor pride, but calm surrender. One eye open, one closed, watching and dreaming both. When sonar scans were taken in 2004, the outlines of the statue revealed proportions eerily familiar, identical to those of standing human figures at Göbekli Tepe and to the Neolithic stone heads of Ain Ghazal. These places are thousands of miles apart, separated by oceans of time. Yet the ratios match as if born from the same geometry, the same hand. Archaeologists, reluctant to believe in impossibility, proposed that the Colossus was constructed during the late Neolithic, perhaps as a mythic guardian of an early port. But when samples were taken, they told another story. The marble had fused with limestone far older than the age of human quarrying, the boundary between carved stone and seabed indistinguishable. It was as though the ocean had turned sculpture into geology, and geology into memory. Myth travels with water. Every civilization that grew beside a river has imagined something immense living beneath it. The Egyptians had Hapi, the divine current that breathed life through the Nile. The Sumerians wrote of the Abzu, a sacred deep where creation began. In the Vedas, Sarasvati herself was both goddess and river, vanishing underground when the world became too loud. And here, in this Iranian plain, The Elamites spoke of the sleepers beneath the stream, beings whose skeletons formed the riverbeds. Their word for them, an Ayash, meant both ancestor and giant. At night, when currents shift, the sea above it forms spirals. Satellite imagery shows these spirals repeating across months, a slow vortex of plankton tracing invisible patterns. Some oceanographers attribute it to temperature gradients, but fishermen tell another story, that the giant still breathes, exhaling dreams into the deep. They say the Colossus was once alive, not a god, not a man, but the earth itself in human shape. When the world grew loud and restless, it lay down to quiet the waves. The sea rose to cover it, and peace returned. Each current, they say, is part of its long sleep. In the early 1980s, an expedition placed hydrophones near the site to study low-frequency sound. What they captured unsettled even the most rational minds. A tone, repeating every few minutes, soft as thunder heard through glass. It did not come from whales, nor from machinery. Its wavelength matched the shape of the basin itself. The ocean, it seemed, was resonating through the form of the statue, as if the Colossus still answered the sea's eternal hum. One diver, a woman named Haney Takano, wrote in her logbook after her 5th descent, "When I hovered by the lips, the current moved outward, gentle, rhythmic, as though the statue sighed. It felt not dead, but dreaming." Later that night, in the research vessel's mess, she told the crew she'd heard something through her regulator. Not a sound, exactly, but a feeling, like a deep note vibrating in her chest. It stayed with her even after surfacing. Many who have dived there since report similar sensations. Some emerge from the depths in tears, unable to explain why. Others refuse to return, haunted not by fear but by awe. "It is like visiting the end of time," one said. "If you could stand upon the seabed, among the coral-grown ribs, the world above would vanish. The sun becomes a dim coin, the water turns blue-gray, and all sound falls away until only your heartbeat remains. A human echo within the slumber of something immeasurably older." Fragments of inscriptions have been found near the site, carved on tablets of serpentine stone. Spirals, arcs, and a single recurring symbol, a circle within an eye. The same emblem appears in Cycladic figurines, in Sumerian seals, in the cave temples of Malta. Perhaps the Colossus was not singular but one of many, guardians of a forgotten age when humans shaped Earth to mirror the divine. Or perhaps it is none of these things. Perhaps it is the sea itself, taking on the face of its own reflection. When Margaret Preston's assistant unearthed a portion of what seemed to be a jawbone, they noticed carvings etched along its curve. Spirals, concentric circles, and a pattern of 7 lines radiating outward. Symbols identical to those found on Proto-Elamite seals. How would a creature carve its own bone? How could stone bear script? The artifact was shipped to London, then misplaced during the war. Only a faded sketch survives. Lines drawn with trembling hands, as though the artist feared what they were seeing. At dusk, when the Mediterranean calms to glass, fishermen claim you can see faint shadows beneath the surface, vast and slow, as though the giant stirs slightly, turning in its sleep. Waves roll without wind. A gull cries once, then falls silent. The horizon blurs. For a heartbeat, you can almost believe that the ocean is dreaming of the sky. And in that dream, the Colossus endures, not broken, not forgotten, only resting in the patient cradle of the deep. The coral grows over its eyes like soft eyelids. The sand settles like a blanket, and the world above moves on, unknowing. Every sea carries its secrets. Every wave remembers. And somewhere beneath them all, something vast breathes very slowly. Perhaps one day, when the earth shifts again, the giant will rise, not in violence, but in remembrance, bringing with it the quiet knowledge of all it has seen. Until then, it sleeps, holding the silence of centuries, the weight of oceans, and the faint pulse of eternity. The Colossus dreams, and in its dreaming, the sea learns to be still. At the edge of maps, where the mountains dissolve into mist and the rivers forget their names, there is said to be a valley that was never found twice. It appears when the air is quiet enough to hear the hum beneath silence. A faint pulse, deep in the soil, like the heartbeat of something still alive. Those who claim to have wandered there call it the garden at the world's beginning. They say the air itself feels ancient, as though each breath carries dust from a forgotten dawn. Trees grow here unlike any seen elsewhere. Their roots spread wide as walls, their trunks braided like rivers, their leaves heavy with silver dew that glows faintly even under cloud. The light never hardens into day, nor deepens into night. Everything exists in a gentle twilight, the eternal hush between beginnings. Explorers have tried to locate it. In 1894, a Russian naturalist named Vasily Orlov wrote of a hidden valley between the peaks of the Tian Shan Range, where the flora appeared Preneolithic and streams glowed faintly under moonlight. His notes describe enormous trees bearing carvings so eroded they seemed like veins of the bark itself. Spirals, suns, and figures of humans whose arms reached upward as though cradling stars. He disappeared before returning from his second expedition. Only his compass was found, its needle rusted and unmoving, as if magnetized toward silence. Under the low light of evening, the river glows a dim copper. Mud cracks at its edges, and in those cracks, tiny shells glitter, remnants of a sea that withdrew 15 million years ago. The bones lie deeper now, unreachable, shifting slowly with every season's flood. But people still come. Nomads, pilgrims, wanderers. They sit by the current and whisper questions into the water. Who built you? Who sleeps beneath your breath? Later, travelers along the Silk Road spoke of the Wadi al-Ruh, the Valley of Spirit, where voices hum under the soil. Bedouin elders said it was a remnant of the first garden, the one that existed before paradise, when earth and sky had not yet learned to separate. There, they said, the roots of all trees met underground, forming a network of memory older than stone. Modern researchers have tried to ground these stories in geology. Beneath the Central Asian ridges, satellite data reveals vast sinkholes and mineral lakes whose chemistry defies standard explanation. Traces of silica and rare earths that create a natural bioluminescence. Some believe these are the origins of the myth. Yet others, poets, monks, wanderers, insist that the garden is no myth at all, that it exists in pockets of time, not geography, that it appears only to those who have forgotten what they came seeking. The few who claim to have found it speak of a sound, not music, not speech, a slow vibration through the air, like the hum of roots communicating. Some call it the breath of creation, others the memory of stillness. It carries through the valley without source or echo, filling the chest with a calm so deep it feels like recognition. In 1951, a team of botanists from Samarkand University reported an anomalous ecosystem deep within an uncharted gorge of the Pamir Range. They described flora that matched no known genus, trees whose rings could not be counted, leaves that emitted low electrical fields, flowers that opened in rhythm to sound. One specimen, a pale vine coiling through basalt cracks, was later found to contain fossilized pollen dated far earlier than any known plant life in the region. Their notes, incomplete and fragmentary, end with a single line written in pencil. We walked into memory itself, somewhere within the heart of that valley. If the stories are to be believed, stands a spring. Its surface mirrors the sky so perfectly that one cannot tell which is reflection. The water is said to carry no taste, no scent, no movement. And yet, when touched, it vibrates faintly, like a string. Travelers speak of seeing within it not their faces, but visions. The earth unbroken, rivers unpolluted, stars newborn and trembling. A vision of what was, or what could be, or perhaps what has always been waiting beneath the noise of history. Ancient Sumerian myths speak of Eden-Na, the plane of origins, where gods planted the seeds of speech and sleep. The word Eden would later evolve into Eden. But before the garden became a tale of exile, it was a story of return, of finding the place where the earth still dreams of itself. Perhaps this hidden valley is that memory made real, not paradise lost, but paradise preserved in the folds of silence. Its trees hum with low-frequency tones, measured by seismographs left behind by explorers, pulses matching the planet's natural resonances. Its streams, though shallow, run warm even in frost. When night comes, if night can be said to come here, the leaves emit a faint blue phosphorescence, as though remembering the starlight from which they were born. To stand in that glow is to feel the boundaries of the self dissolve. You realize that breath, wind, and time are not separate things, that everything moves through everything else. The ancients may have known this. Perhaps that is why they spoke of gods walking among trees, not above them. No one stays in the valley long. They all describe the same feeling, a gentle sorrow, a recognition too vast to bear. To witness the world as it was before division is to remember what was lost with language. Those who leave say they can no longer hear birds without hearing echoes of the same hum beneath their wings. They see rivers differently, as though every current still carries a memory of that first, perfect flow. In 2019, a team of environmental researchers searching for ancient pollen signatures in the Pamir foothills found something astonishing. A sample of soil containing genetic traces from dozens of now extinct species of tree. It was, they wrote, as if a primordial garden had stood here before the glaciers came. The data aligned precisely with the coordinates from Orloff's last expedition. A French hydrologist, Émile Courant, documented a strange phenomenon in 1968. A magnetic fluctuation near the old river curve. Compass needles spun, iron filings formed spirals along the ground. He concluded that mineral veins, heavy with magnetite, underlay the bed. Yet his notes describe something poetic despite himself. It feels as though the earth remembers being alive. No further study was permitted. The area was declared a conservation zone, off-limits to excavation. Perhaps it was an act of protection, perhaps of reverence. Those who know the legend say that when humankind grows too weary, the garden will open again. It will not announce itself. The mist will part, the trees will hum, and the earth will, for a brief moment, remember being whole. Maybe the garden never vanished. Maybe it moved inside us, into the small chambers of memory that awaken when we close our eyes. Maybe every forest, every seed, every heartbeat carries a fragment of its dream. And when the world sleeps, truly sleeps in stillness, the hum returns. The soil breathes, the roots whisper. The garden waits, not as a promise, but as a pulse. A reminder that the beginning was never lost, only buried under the noise of remembering. And if you listen very softly, between your heartbeats, you might hear it. The first sound, the oldest silence, the echo of the world becoming. The journey ends where it began, in stillness. Stories persist. Some claim that the giants of old drowned themselves here, their breath turning to mist, their ribs forming the river's gentle curves. Others believe the bones belong to forgotten leviathans from the epoch before men, when the sea still whispered to the land. And a few, those who come at twilight to offer a candle to the water, say the bones belong to no creature at all. They are echoes carved into stone, memory hardened into shape. The wind has quieted, the dust has settled. The voices of stone, river, and mountain fade into the same soft hum, the breath that has always filled the space between stars. We have wandered through valleys that remembered their shadows, rivers that sang beneath their own reflection, mountains that dreamed beneath the constellations. We passed gates that hummed in silence, libraries carved in the veins of memory, pillars that steadied the heavens, halls where footsteps continued even after time grew tired. We looked upward, where the sky was written in stone, and downward, where a sleeping colossus cradled the sea. And finally we returned to the first garden, where all things began as one. Each place whispered the same truth, that the world remembers itself. Every ruin, every ripple, every fragment of myth is not a remnant, but a reminder that creation never ended. It only slowed its voice to match our breathing. Archaeology calls it sediment. Faith calls it miracle. But in the hush between those two words lies something deeper. A pulse, gentle as light through dust. Perhaps the giants never left. Perhaps they became mountains. Perhaps the songs of rivers are only the dreams of the colossi beneath them. Perhaps the gates and pillars were not meant to lead upward or hold weight, but to keep the rhythm steady while the universe learned to listen. When you close your eyes tonight, remember, when you kneel beside the Karun after sunset, the reflections shift like smoke. A slow current touches the skin with warmth, as if greeting an old friend. The reeds hush. The world reduces to three sounds: the murmur of water, the soft creak of the earth, the quiet pulse of your own heart. It becomes difficult to tell which belongs to which. The river begins to feel like an organ of the planet, an artery carrying the earth's blood, a breath passing through forgotten lungs. You are standing in that same silence, a single heartbeat in the library of stone dreams. Your breath is the echo of the pillar's hum. Your pulse, the footstep that never fades. The earth still carries its memory through you. And when sleep comes, as gentle as dust over an old inscription, you will hear it. A vibration too soft for waking ears. A lullaby made of sky and shadow. A voice older than language whispering, "You were here at the beginning. You are here still." And somewhere beyond the last horizon, the valley, the river, the mountain, the gate, the garden. Archaeologists have debated whether ancient settlements nearby, Tape Yehya, Sharai Sokta, were built to mirror celestial rivers seen in the night sky. The Milky Way, called the bone of heaven in some Akkadian hymns, may have inspired their alignment. The earth reflected the sky. The rivers reflected the stars. Perhaps the valley's strange resonance is part of that forgotten symmetry, a reminder that what flowed above once also flowed below. All breathe together once more. The silence deepens. The stars listen. And the world, for a moment, is whole again. In the dim reaches of history, humans learned to trust water with their dead. Bodies laid at the edge of rivers so the soul could travel. Boats carved to drift without oars. Stones cast into currents carrying the names of those who should not be spoken. Maybe these bones were not creatures but monuments, an ancient attempt to teach the river to remember. At midnight, when the moon hangs over the plain, the river becomes a ribbon of mercury. Shadows of reeds twist upon it, and the pale glimmer of submerged shapes flickers below. The current hushes into near stillness. Then comes the hum, faint at first, then fuller, like the note of a deep instrument struck by invisible hands. It travels through the soles, the knees, the spine, until one feels less like a body and more like a tuning fork in the hand of the earth. The sound is neither song nor lament. It is simply presence. The people of the nearby village call it the breathing of the old ones. They say that once a year, when the river reaches its highest swell, the bones move slightly, realigning beneath the current. They turn to face the stars again, an old woman once told a visiting researcher. They remember where the heavens were. No photograph has ever captured them clearly. When divers try, the images blur, frames filled with shimmering distortion as though the river itself refuses to be reduced to evidence. A handful of sonar scans exist, ghostly outlines of arches and curves, suggestive, not certain. They hang now in university basements, quiet, unsolved, and somehow sacred. When dawn returns, the mist thins. The bones disappear beneath the glare, and the river resumes its ordinary face. Patient, indifferent, alive. Trucks roll over distant bridges. The world wakes, and the valley forgets for another day. But those who have listened know that something beneath that surface still breathes, softly, in time with the tides of the moon. Maybe they are truly bones, remnants of beings who shaped the first paths of water. Maybe they are the ribs of the world itself, curved to cradle the memory of all things that have flowed and been lost. Or maybe they are only the echoes of human longing, the shape that awe takes when it turns to stone. Whatever they are, the river keeps their secret. It moves as it always has, slow, shining, ancient, carrying in its depths the low hum of something that will never quite surface. And when night comes again, and the moon glides back over the bend, you might hear it, that faint vibration rising from the deep. A sound older than words, gentle as breath, reminding the living that the past never truly sleeps. Somewhere beneath the river's breath, the bones wait, not for discovery, but remembrance. And the water, in its endless patience, keeps whispering their names. In a far corner of the world, where the air thins and the sky becomes ancient again. A single mountain lies shaped like a sleeping face. Its slopes curve like a brow and a cheek, its ridges folding into what seems, unmistakably, to be a closed eye. When the light of evening drifts across it, that eye glows with a quiet, golden patience, as though still dreaming beneath layers of dust and ice. Locals call it Koh Kwaban, the Mountain of Dreams, a name whispered through centuries of nomads and shepherds in the highlands between Baltistan and the northern reaches of the Hindu Kush. It rises from a desolate valley of cold wind and salt-torn stone. The glaciers nearby gleam blue, fractured like glass. No paths lead to the summit, for it is said to be alive, not in body but in memory. In 1912, an Italian mountaineer named Arturo Maffei wrote of this place in a letter now preserved in Turin. He had attempted to cross the northern ridge and returned in silence. His notes mention an outline of a face so vast it could only have been carved by sky and time. Yet he added something else, a line almost trembling. At night, the mountain breathes. His words were dismissed as exhaustion or fever, until decades later, a team of geologists from the University of Karachi recorded slight rhythmic vibrations emanating from deep beneath its base. Every 6 hours, like the pulse of a sleeping creature. Geologically, the formation is nearly impossible. The strata twist in ways that defy tectonic explanation, curving in perfect anatomical symmetry. The right ridge aligns with the celestial belt of Orion during the winter solstice, an alignment known from Mesopotamian temples, not mountain ranges. Seismic instruments have detected subterranean hollows that echo sound differently than solid rock. When wind passes through them, it produces tones, long, low, mournful, that roll across the valley like breathing in slow motion. Legends wound around the mountain long before science arrived. Ancient Buddhist texts found in nearby Gilgit speak of the sleeper who guards the stars, a being who lay down before the age of men, promising to keep the constellations from falling. In Sumerian epics, a parallel figure appears, and Shamash, the stone dreamer, who fell from the heavens and turned to earth so humanity could stand upright. The same story finds echoes in Norse myth, where Ymir's body became the world's bones. Always the same image, a colossal form resting, holding the balance of heaven and ground. Travelers who camp in the valley tell of strange sensations. A slow hum beneath the earth, a sense that the air grows heavier after midnight, as though the mountain exhales through the stones. The shepherds who still graze their flocks nearby leave offerings of butter and salt at its base. Small rituals carried from generation to generation. They do not worship it, but acknowledge it, as one might greet an elder passing by. In 1987, satellite imagery confirmed the mountain's uncanny symmetry. A face profile could be traced from ridge to glacier, nearly a kilometer long, precise enough that software used for topographic mapping identified facial geometry. Geologists attributed it to natural coincidence. Yet myth had already known. Ancient rock carvings in Hunza, barely 50 kilometers away, depict a sleeping figure surrounded by stars, carved thousands of years before flight or satellite sight. Under the stars, the mountain glows faintly blue. The snow along its brow catches light like the reflection of distant fires. When the wind drops, an immense stillness falls over the valley. You can almost hear the glaciers creak, slow, deliberate, like the stretching of an ancient limb. Those who have kept watch at night claim to have felt tremors, not of danger but of presence, as if something vast shifts in its sleep. Perhaps it is only geology. Perhaps what we call breath is merely the expansion and contraction of stone under the cold. But as the hours pass, one feels less certain. The rhythm is too steady, too deliberate. It's as though the mountain has a heart of molten silence. Among local stories, there is one told only to children by firelight, that the sleeper was once a guardian of the heavens. When humankind first learned to shape metal, their forges sent sparks that rose to the sky. The stars, frightened by imitation, began to fade. To preserve their light, the guardian descended and lay upon the earth, swearing never to move again. In doing so, it sealed the night into stillness. The stars returned, but the guardian slept, and the world forgot its voice. Centuries later, When monks from the Gandhara monasteries crossed this region, they built small shrines at the mountain's edge. Fragments of their votive tablets remain. Lotus symbols, half-erased inscriptions invoking the still one who holds the firmament. Archaeologists catalog them as Buddhist artifacts, dated to the 2nd century CE. Yet none bear the Buddha's image, only the outline of a reclining form with stars carved above. At night, the wind turns cold and dry. The Milky Way arcs directly above the mountain's face. Seen from the valley, it looks like a silver veil descending upon a giant sleeper. One cannot help but feel a reverence difficult to name. Not belief, not fear, only a profound quiet, as if standing in the presence of something that no longer requires worship. An old mountaineer once described it best. It is not a mountain you climb, but one you wait beside. He spoke of an experience one winter evening, when the stars flickered, then brightened suddenly. The air trembled. A faint sound, like a deep chord struck on invisible strings, filled the valley. His companions heard it too. Instruments registered no earthquake, no avalanche. Only that resonance, that strange, harmonic sigh. For a moment, they felt certain the sleeper had stirred. Not to wake, but to remind the earth that it was still being held. Later studies suggested that the sound came from glacial movement amplified by natural caverns. But those who stood there remember differently. They recall the warmth of the ground beneath their boots, and how every echo seemed to rise through their bodies until it hummed behind their eyes. Ancient myths often tell of giants as violent beings, destroyers, tempters, enemies of gods. But this mountain tells another story, of a being who chose stillness. Its myth feels less like warning, more like lullaby, a promise of balance, of silence so deep it keeps the heavens steady. Sometimes, before dawn, fog gathers around the valley floor. It rolls upward in slow waves, veiling the mountain until only its outline remains, the curve of a cheek against the fading stars. When the first light breaks, frost catches on the stones, glittering like veins of silver. The illusion of breath dissolves, but the impression lingers, that the entire world just exhaled. The people who live nearby say the mountain dreams of us, that every few centuries, when humankind grows restless, it shifts slightly in its sleep, not to awaken, but to remind us of the pace of eternity. There is no summit trail, no shrine large enough to contain its presence. Only silence and the stars, and beneath them, the shape of a face older than language, carved by wind and time and something else we do not yet have words for. The explorers, the scientists, the pilgrims, they all leave with the same thought, that perhaps the earth is not merely alive, but conscious in its own slow rhythm, and that mountains are its dreams, colossal, patient, remembering when God still walked and the stars were still being named. When the night deepens, the constellations tilt westward, and the first faint warmth of dawn touches the frozen ridges. The mountain seems to soften. The eye that has never opened catches a final glimmer of light. And in that moment, before day breaks, the whole valley feels like a heartbeat suspended between sleep and waking. Perhaps it is only stone, or perhaps it is something more, the memory of balance, the world's oldest vow of stillness. The mountain rests, unchanged, unbroken, beneath the stars. And as we drift toward sleep, it breathes once more, quietly, endlessly, as the sky remembers its keeper. The desert stretches like an endless parchment, its dunes folding into one another as though time itself were being rewritten by the wind. Somewhere in this vastness, near the southern reaches of the empty quarter, there lies a cliff, colorless by day, golden by dusk, and within it, a doorway. No road leads to it. The sands drift and erase all trails by morning. Only the stars can guide a traveler there, for the gate is carved directly into stone so old that its surface no longer remembers the tools that shaped it. The first to rediscover it in the modern age was an archaeologist named Dr. Leila Hossein, a quiet woman from Cairo who preferred the company of ruins to that of cities. In 1978, following satellite anomalies along the Rub al-Khali Basin, she and her team stumbled upon a cliff face that seemed too symmetrical to be natural. It was vast, smooth, and strangely vertical, a sandstone wall where the desert should have been chaotic. The structure measured nearly 60 meters across and rose from the dunes like the facade of a buried city. At its heart was an archway, perfectly proportioned, 15 meters high, carved with precision so exact that its inner curve caught the wind and turned it into a tone. A single, low hum that resonated for seconds after each gust. The locals had a name for it long before any scientists came. Bab al-Samt, the Gate of Silence. There are no inscriptions around it, no hieroglyphs, no recognizable script. Only a repeating pattern of concentric spirals and rays that seem to radiate outward, as though the gate itself were breathing. When sunlight strikes it at dawn, the carved lines glow faintly. Not gold, not silver, but something between, a color closer to memory than metal. Some said it was Nabatean, the work of the same stonemasons who built Petra. But the measurements do not match. The proportions follow a geometry older, closer to the harmonic ratios found in the temples of Sumer and pre-dynastic Egypt. The stones here hum when touched. You can feel vibration through the fingertips, as if a sound once trapped inside still lingers. One of Dr. Hossein's assistants, a Jordanian field researcher named Farid, wrote in his diary, "When we stood before it at dusk, the air changed. It was like being inside a breath that was not our own. They tested the interior with radar. Behind the arch lay solid rock, no tunnel, no chamber. Yet the readings revealed hollow fluctuations, pockets of density that rose and fell like an echo of architecture within the stone itself. It was as though a temple existed there, folded into silence." Local Bedouin tell an older story. Long before Islam, long before the kingdoms of Sheba and Dilmun, this land was ruled by those who shaped with sound. They did not build by hand but by resonance, using tones that made sand cohere into stone. The gate, they say, was their final creation, not an entrance but a seal. Behind it sleeps what should never again speak. And still the desert hums. When night arrives, stars gather over the horizon in perfect alignment. The Milky Way bends directly above the arch. The air grows still and then, faintly, a vibration begins, a tone low enough to feel in the ribs. Instruments detect nothing measurable, no wind velocity, no movement of air. The sound rises from the stone itself, as though the cliff exhales. Dr. Hossein's recordings, now archived in the Museum of Antiquities in Cairo, capture these tones. When analyzed, the frequencies form harmonic intervals identical to those used in Sumerian hymns to Inanna. Coincidence, perhaps, but too precise to dismiss. A graduate student who heard the recording described it as the feeling of standing inside a heartbeat. The deeper mystery came with the carvings. Each spiral on the gate aligns to a celestial coordinate, Sirius, Betelgeuse, Vega. But one spiral points toward no known star. It marks a position beyond the ecliptic, where the ancients believed the world of the dead began. The desert nomads say it is the mouth of the undersky, the point where sound passes through to the other side. During one excavation, a storm rose unexpectedly. Sand whirled in dense, metallic sheets, and lightning struck close by, shattering their instruments. The team took shelter within the hollow beneath the arch, though the space seemed too narrow for protection. When thunder rolled across the plain, something strange occurred. The gate began to sing. The resonance deepened into a chord that lasted almost a full minute, trembling through the bones of those who stood near it. The air was luminous, vibrating like a living thing. After the storm passed, silence returned. The desert was still, utterly still, and every compass needle pointed directly toward the arch Farid wrote. It is as if the earth acknowledges it. Later studies of the sandstone revealed traces of minerals uncommon in the region, quartz and magnetite, substances known to hold piezoelectric charge. Perhaps, scientists suggested, the gate's singing was natural. Vibrations amplified through quartz crystal when struck by thunder. Yet something remained unaccounted for, the precision of the carving, the geometry of its ratios, the impossible harmony of its sound. The more one looks, the less it resembles a monument, and the more it feels like an instrument, a doorway not meant to open, but to resonate, to translate silence into tone, and tone into stillness. At dawn, Shadows draw across its surface like hands brushing the sand. The spirals seem to move with the light, turning slowly, though they are carved in unmoving stone. The air tastes faintly metallic, like breath before rain. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the visible cliff, geophones register a pulse, one beat every 72 seconds, the same rhythm found in the geomagnetic oscillations of the planet. When the Bedouins speak of it, they lower their voices. They say the gate listens, that each time someone speaks before it, the echo is not merely sound returning, but memory being weighed. The wise, they say, speak only once and listen thereafter. No excavation has gone deeper. After Dr. Hossein's final visit, the site was buried again by shifting dunes. She never published her findings, leaving only fragments of her field journal. Sketches of the spiral carvings, a few spectral readings, and one line written in the corner of a page. Silence is older than language. In later years, satellite images showed the dunes shifting back and forth across the region, yet the gate remained visible, never covered for long. It seemed to reject burial. Even the desert, in its restlessness, could not erase it completely. Travelers who find it by accident often describe a peculiar peace that falls upon them. Some say it feels like entering a pause in the world, a breath between one age and the next. Animals do not cross its threshold. Even the wind quiets as it passes. When night deepens and the stars scatter their light upon the dunes, the gate glows faintly again. Perhaps the minerals, perhaps reflection, perhaps memory. And sometimes, those who keep vigil swear they hear faint chanting, distant, layered, like many voices humming from within the rock. The sound is not mournful. It is simply awake. What the gate was meant to guard or call or remember, no one knows. But every civilization that vanished before leaving their mark on history seems to echo here. The Sumerians' dream of sound, the Egyptians' belief that words could move stone, the forgotten rituals of Dilmun, all gathered in one silent arch, still singing across the millennia. The desert does not offer explanations. It only keeps what refuses to die. And so the gate remains, open yet sealed, voiceless yet resonant, invisible to the unlistening world. Perhaps it was never meant to lead anywhere. Perhaps it was built to remind that silence itself is the first doorway, and every word that follows is merely an echo. When the wind returns, the gate hums again, a tone deep enough to feel behind the sternum, soft enough to lull the listener into stillness. And as the stars drift overhead, one might imagine the sound continuing long after hearing fades, a vibration that will outlast language, a song the earth still hums to itself, the gate carved in silence, still listening, as the night folds over its breath. Beneath the cliffs of an arid plateau in the heart of Anatolia, there is a labyrinth of stone that breathes, not in movement, not in sound, but in a stillness so dense it feels alive. To reach it, one must descend through narrow gorges veined with quartz, the air cooling with every step, the echo of one's own footsteps fading until only the faint pulse of the earth remains. There are no signs to guide the way, no recorded path. The locals of the nearby village call the place Darren Hafiza, the deep memory. Shepherds have known of it for centuries but approach it only when lost, or when the mind feels too full of noise. They say the stones there remember what men forget. The site was first documented, unofficially, in 1962 by a Turkish geologist, Kemal Duran, who was mapping fault lines south of Cappadocia. He followed an unusual magnetic reading along a ridge of obsidian cliffs and stumbled upon an opening, a cleft so narrow he had to turn sideways to enter. Inside, he found corridors stretching into darkness, their walls polished smooth as if shaped by breath, not hand. He carried no light, yet as his eyes adjusted, faint luminescence traced the walls, like veins of distant starlight sealed within the rock. When he returned with lanterns and measuring tools, the air itself seemed reluctant. Words echoed strangely, returning softer, slower, as though translated by time. Duran recorded a few notes before the entrance collapsed in a minor quake later that year. For decades, his report gathered dust in an archive in Ankara. It might have been forgotten entirely, if not for a new expedition half a century later, one that uncovered the labyrinth again. Dr. Sophie Hallberg, a German archaeologist known for her work on Göbekli Tepe, led that second team in 2013. Her notes speak of a chamber built not for worship, but remembrance. The tunnels curved in deliberate patterns, spiraling inward like a fingerprint. No inscriptions were carved on the walls, yet faint reliefs, almost imperceptible, formed along the stone, flowing lines resembling the ripples of water frozen in motion.